السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Welcome back to our Ramadan series, Living with Prophet Yusuf. Inshallah ta'ala, as I said to you guys, I had no intention on doing a class today. As I told you guys yesterday, we were going to cancel class for today and start tomorrow. However, alhamdulillah, a good friend of mine, very dear friend of mine, gave me some advice and told me to just kind of keep going. So, inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to keep going. All right. We stopped yesterday at lesson number 50, which was the responsibility of removing yourself from anything doubtful or questionable falls on your shoulders. The responsibility of removing yourself from a doubtful situation is your responsibility. That is your responsibility. It falls on your shoulders. And so Yusuf alayhi salam, he asked the king to go and investigate the women who cut their hands before he was released from prison. He said that he's not going to leave prison until that matter is clarified. And as I mentioned, he will say a few ayats later, ذَلِكَ لِيَعْلَمْ أَنِّي لَمْ أَخُنْهُ بِالْغَيْبِ, that so the Aziz would know, or so the people would know, that I would never betray the Aziz. I would never betray him behind his back. Yusuf went through all of this just to prove to everybody, let it show for the record, that I would never, betray him behind his back. And so the onus or the responsibility, if there's anything questionable about your character, about your integrity, your muru'ah, it becomes your responsibility to clarify. Stop relying on people to have husnul dhan and say, oh, people should have husnul dhan. That is putting the responsibility on people, right? Putting the responsibility on the people to have husnul dhan, rather than taking the onus or taking the responsibility yourself and clarifying that there's nothing, about yourself that is questionable. Okay. So the king brings the women to the court. The king brings the women to the court. He asks the women, ma khatabukum, what is your deal with Yusuf? What is this situation? And keep in mind, the king is not stupid. The king already knew that there was something truthful about Yusuf, number one, from the interpretation of the dream, and number two, because I'm trying to free this guy. This guy has been in prison for 12 years. And now I'm trying to free this guy from prison, and he doesn't want to leave. There has to be something that within itself has to, trigger something. It has to ring an alarm. It has to send off an alarm in your head. Something ain't right about this situation. Something is not right about this situation. Here's a guy who's been in prison for 12 years. And now I'm extending him an opportunity to be released from prison. And he's telling me, no, he's not leaving prison until I investigate the women. You understand? Like, the king knew from that there has to be something truthful about this guy. So the king already had his reservations about what happened. However, he brings the women to the court and he questions the women in front of everybody. This is the king in his court. He brings the women, the 5 or 7 women that were there, brings them there. Ma khatabukum. Ma khatabukunna idh rawattunna Yusuf an nafsi. What is this deal with you guys and Yusuf and you trying to seduce him against his will? And the women say, Kulna hasha lillah. Allah forbid, God forbid. We have never ever known anything evil about Yusuf. La qalil wa la kathir. Not something minor, not something major. We have never known anything evil about him. Then the king turns to the wife of the Aziz, who you're going to find out today that her circumstances had changed dramatically. She was not the Zuleika at this time that she was at the time of this incident. A lot of things had transpired in her life up to that point. So she was not the same person. All right. She was not sitting from this place of prestige, anymore. A lot of things had transpired in the 12 years since that happened. So the king turns to Zuleika and he asks, her the same question. What's the deal with you and Yusuf? And she says, Al-an has al-haq. Now tabayyin al-haq. Now the truth has finally come out. And I'm guessing she's saying this. This is just me. I didn't read this any tafsir. It's just me, inserting my own 2 cents. I'm guessing, as we said before, it takes more energy to maintain a lie than it does the truth. And sometimes when you have no other recourse other than to just come out with the truth, it just feels so good. It just feels so good that you can just finally own it. You can just finally own up to it and you can put it behind you. She said, Al-an has al-haq. Now, finally, the truth has come out. It was almost like it was a sigh of relief for her. It was almost as if she could breathe now. Like I've been holding on to this lie for so many years, man. And now finally the opportunity presents itself for me to just come out and just own it. To just own it. I remember as a kid lying to my mother and, I'd be in punishment and my mom would send me to my room and you got to stay there until you decide that you're ready to come out with the truth. And a day will go by because I'm stubborn. You know what I mean? I'm stubborn. I'm stubborn. So I'm going to stay in the room for a day, 2 days, 3 days. And my mother looking at me like, you still not ready to come out with the truth? Meanwhile, your mother already knows what the truth is. Your mother already knows. She's just waiting for you to own it. And then finally, when you're tired of being in your room, you come out and you're like, Ma, I did break it. And she's like, well, why did you sit in your room for 3 days on punishment when you could have just told me the truth? Why you have to be so stubborn? Why you got to be so damn hard-headed? You could have just told me the truth. I already knew you did it. I already knew you did it. But, in that moment, in that moment, when you say the truth in that moment, it just feels so good. It's just like, all right, let me just put this behind me. It's over. It's over. All right. She said, Al-an has al-haq. Now the truth has become apparent. Ana rawattuhu an nafsi. I tried to seduce him. Wa innahu lamina as-sadiqin. And Yusuf was truthful. He was truthful. Throughout the whole ordeal, he was truthful. All right. And so this was, as I said, we were going to establish throughout this whole situation, this particular chapter of his life, we were going to establish 4 things. Fadlu Yusuf, the virtue of Yusuf, which we've already seen all of that. Number 2, we were going to see the knowledge of Yusuf. When he translated the dream and the king said, immediately free that man, free him and bring him to me. We saw his knowledge. We saw his virtue. We were going to see his bara'ah, his innocence. We finally got to his innocence. She finally owned the narrative that I tried to seduce him. He never did anything wrong. We've now established his bara'ah, his innocence in front of the king, in front of the king's court, in front of the women, in front of everybody. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we move on to the next ayah. Right? We move on to the next ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذَلِكَ لِيَعْلَمْ أَنِّي لَمْ أَخُنْهُ بِالْغَيْبِ. And Yusuf, it was reported that Yusuf said, this is so that the Aziz, or so that the people will know that I never, أَخُنْهُ بِالْغَيْبِ, I never betrayed him in his absence. Yusuf is explaining why. We're on ayat number 52. Surah 12, ayat 52. Right? Yusuf said, this is so he, the Aziz, will know that I never betrayed him in his absence and that God does not guide the plan of those who betray. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا يهدي كيد الخائنين, that Allah does not guide the plotting and the scheming of those who are hell-bent on betraying people. So Yusuf is explaining why, for the record, why he went through all of this trouble, so that the Aziz, so that the people, so that the king, so that everybody would know that he would never betray someone like that in his absence. Yusuf was concerned about his honor. Yusuf realized that he could not move on to the next chapter of his life without closing this door first. All right? Some of us have left so many doors open, which is why we have never had closure. And that brings me to lesson number 51. Lesson 51. The only closure that you need is to know that you did the right thing by the other person. That's the only closure that you need. Yusuf is saying, because at this time, the Aziz was dead. The Aziz died while Yusuf was in prison. So you would think, why is he going through all of this trouble? The Aziz is dead. Situation is over. The woman claimed. Yusuf said, I want this to be for the record. I want it to be known for the record that I never betrayed that man behind his back. I never betrayed that man behind his back. By this time, the Aziz is dead. The Aziz died while Yusuf was in prison. So why go through all the trouble? He goes through all the trouble because the only closure that you need is to know that you did right by the other person. That's it. That is closure for me. Lesson number 51. The only closure that you need sometimes is to know that you did the right thing. You did right by the other person. You understand? I did the best that I could. I did right by you. And for me, that's closure. Whether you accept that, whether you acknowledge that, whether you recognize that, that is on you. That is on you. Because our problem sometimes is that we seek external validation and we substitute external validation for closure. External validation is not closure. External validation is not closure. That's not closure. Closure is you knowing that I did the right thing by you. Whether it was in a marriage didn't work, and the person could say, oh, we're divorced because you did this. Listen, I'm not getting into all of that. I know that for the time that we were married, I did my best. I tried. I did my best. You understand? I did my best. For the time that we were married, I did my best. Or I didn't do so well. I didn't do my best. And that's a lesson that I will have to learn. I will have to take with me along my journey. But if I didn't do right by you when we were married, that means that I did the best that I could at that moment. And perhaps my best was not good enough. And I can live with that. Perhaps my best was not good enough for you. Perhaps my best was not good enough to sustain and maintain our situation. Sometimes it's not. I did my best, but sometimes our best is just not good enough. It's just not good. It's not the glue that's going to keep two people together. But Yusuf alayhi salam went through all of this trouble to prove, to close this door, to bring closure to the situation so that he can move on to the next phase of his life. What's called a graceful exit. And in order for you to have a graceful exit cannot happen without closure. A graceful exit cannot happen without closure. And the closure sometimes that you need is not for the other person to validate you, but the closure is for you to validate yourself by knowing I did the best that I could with what I had. You understand? I did the best that I could with what I had. And perhaps at that time I was immature. I didn't, there was a lot of things that I didn't know. I was still developing. I was still growing. It is what it is. Perhaps my best was not good enough for us at that time. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes we are doing our best, but our best is where we are. You know what I mean? Our situation might require 80. Our best is like 40, 50. You know what I mean? And it's just not enough. As Allah says in the Quran, لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع. لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع. It's not satiating, it's not satisfying for the situation. And that eye isn't in reference to the people who will eat the devil heads in the hellfire. That is not going to be satisfying or satiating. They're just going to eat, but it's not going to be satisfying and satiating. And sometimes we're doing our best in a situation, but it's not enough. Right? It's a lesson for future growth. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a lesson for future growth. It's just, I'm doing my best. It's just that my best is just not enough at this moment. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So do you feel sorry? No, you don't feel sorry. Here again, you're not relying on external validation. You're not waiting for the other person to say, yeah, you did your best. No, I'm not waiting for you to say that. Validation comes from within. A graceful exit cannot happen without closure. And sometimes the closure that you need is for you to tell yourself, I did my best. Yusuf was not proving, and it proves my point, because the Aziz was not even alive at this time. So you would think, why is Yusuf going through all of this trouble? To prove his innocence. He's saying basically, let it show for the record. Even though the Aziz is dead, meaning I'm not trying to prove to the Aziz, I'm trying to validate myself. And I'm trying to let everybody else know that I didn't deceive this guy in his absence. I did not betray this guy behind his back. ذلك ليعلم أني لم أخنه بالغيب وأن الله لا يهدي كيد الخائنين. And let the record show, let everybody know that I did not betray this man behind his back, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not guide, even if I had betrayed him. Inna Allah la yahdi kayd al-kha'inin. Allah does not guide the plotting and scheming of those who betray. You understand? Yes, a man of honesty. He was a man of honesty. I did my best. Keep it moving. Absolutely. So you did your best despite how things turned out. Our mistake is that we exchange or we conflate external validation for closure. Your recognizing that I did my best is not closure for me. Me recognizing that I did my best is closure for me. You can believe whatever the hell you want to believe. You can think I am not responsible for what you believe about me. I've said it 1,000 times. I am not responsible for what you think about me. You are. The only thing that I am responsible for is my thoughts. That's it. I'm not responsible for what you think. You are entitled to believe whatever you want to believe. I am only responsible for what I believe. And I believe that I did my best. And I got to keep it moving. Right? So this closure was important to Yusuf. Otherwise, it would haunt him in the next phase of his journey. Some of us are being haunted right now. Haunted right now. Haunted right now because we did not bring closure from previous chapters in our lives. And so they are haunting us in our current chapter. You understand? Some of us right now in this particular chapter of our lives, where we are right now in our lives, you are being haunted right now because you never brought closure to the previous chapters of your life. Yusuf is bringing closure. Yusuf is bringing closure to that chapter because he knows that we're about to put this behind me. I'm getting ready to be released from prison. I'm getting ready to start another journey, another chapter of my life. I'm just bringing closure to that. I'm bringing closure to that. So we move on to the next ayah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي إِنَّ رَبِّي غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. That it was said that and we'll get into the difference of opinion here. It was said that this statement was the statement of Zulaykha. She said, La ubarri'u nafsi, I do not acquit myself. Inna nafsa la'ammaratun bisu, that the soul inclines towards evil except those upon which my Lord has mercy. Inna Rabbi ghafurur rahim. Indeed, my Lord is ghafur, forgiving and merciful. Some scholars, like Ibn Kathir, says that this was the statement of Zulaykha after she said she would not betray her husband. They're saying that the comment before, the ayat before, this is all the statement of Zulaykha. That she said, I wanted for the record to show that I never betrayed my husband. But it just doesn't seem like that's her comment. Nonetheless, this was the opinion of Ibn Kathir. And that she's saying that she feared when she said that I did not, but I want the record to show that I did not betray my husband in his absence. She's saying basically she didn't want people to think that she was completely innocent in the situation. So she says, La ubarri'u nafsi, I do not acquit myself, meaning I do share in some of this blame, right? So she didn't want people to think that she was completely innocent, that she humbles herself here and says that she was wrong. And this is part of the process for Tawbah. La ubarri'u nafsi, that I do not acquit myself. Inna nafsa la'ammaratun bisu, that my soul inclined towards evil except those upon which my Lord has mercy. And this shows us the requisites of Tawbah, as that you have to have remorse, you have to clarify, and you have to make things right. You got to make stuff right. If your sin involves somebody else, you can't just walk away from it thinking, I'm going to just go ask Allah for forgiveness. Nah, you got to rectify that. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah number 2, ayah 16. I'll find the ayat. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not 2:16. I'll find the ayat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ تَابُوا وَأَصْلَحُوا وَبَيَّنُوا فَأُولَٰئِكَ أَتُوبُ عَلَيْهِمْ وَأَنَا التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ. Except those who repent, those who turn to Allah. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ تَابُوا, those who turn to Allah. وَأَصْلَحُوا, and they rectify the situation that they messed up. وَبَيَّنُوا, and they clarify that they were wrong. These are the requisites of Tawbah. And then Allah says, فَأُولَٰئِكَ أَتُوبُ عَلَيْهِمْ, these are the people who I will turn to with forgiveness. وَأَنَا التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ, and I am a tawwab, the off-turning, ar-rahim, and most merciful. I believe this is in Surah Tawbah, Surah number 9. Either Surah number 9, ayah 16, or Surah number 8 and Fal 16. I'm not sure. You guys can double check. All right. But these are the requisites of Tawbah. She's clarifying. She's owning her part in all of it, desiring him, locking him in the room, threatening him with prison. She's now owning all of it. La ubarri'u nafsi. I don't acquit myself. However, Imam al-Tabari, Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari, he says that this was the statement of Yusuf and not the statement of Zulaykha. And the reason why Yusuf is saying here, I don't acquit myself either. Indeed, the soul inclines towards evil except those upon which my Lord has mercy. This was the statement of Yusuf trying to lessen the embarrassment of Zulaykha. And that seems to be more appropriate. That this is, here she is in front of the king, in front of the court, in front of everybody. Keep in mind, Yusuf's relationship with Zulaykha was far deeper than just she, tried to seduce me. He lived in a home with her since he was 7, 8 years old. You understand? He lived in a home with her. So she did treat him like a mother would. She did engage him like a mother would engage a son. She did honor him. She did make his stay comfortable. She did make his stay honorable. You understand? So there was a previous relationship between them before all of this jumped off. And so Yusuf has this soft spot in his heart for Zulaykha. And then seeing her under these conditions, seeing her in that situation, because her situation had changed. As I said before, she was not the Zulaykha, the wife of the Aziz, that she was. She was not the same Zulaykha in this situation as she was when that incident happened. When that incident happened, she was on her high horse. She was the wife of the Aziz. You know what I mean? He had compassion for her, yes. He felt like, man, this woman is just kind of laying it all out. Man, I feel bad, man. So Yusuf says, وَلَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي, I don't acquit myself either. You know what I mean? Like, As we know in the ayats previously, Yusuf said, Allah says, لَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِي وَهَمَّ بِهَا لَوْلَا أَرَّأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّي. That she desired Yusuf, and Yusuf would have desired her had he not seen the signs of his Lord. And Yusuf also said, "O Allah, if you do not remove the plotting and scheming of these women from me, I might incline towards them." So Yusuf is saying here, just out of humility, min bab at-tawadhu', humbling himself. Right, the compassion, the empathy. He's saying, "Wala ubarri'u nafsi." I don't acquit myself either in this situation. Like we could, we all share in some blame, even though Yusuf didn't do anything wrong. Even though he did nothing wrong, it was the embarrassment. He's trying to yukhaffif, he's trying to lessen the embarrassment of Zulaykha in this humiliating situation that she is in. You understand? He's trying to lessen the embarrassment on her. You know how somebody is in a situation and they just like mad embarrassed? You know how sometimes, as a man, we hate to see, some men enjoy seeing their wives in a humble position. But sometimes when your wife comes to you and she's apologizing and, she's emotional, she's apologizing, you're like, nah, babe, don't, I share in the blame in that too. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't all your fault. Basically, you know that you didn't do anything wrong, but you don't like, like some people, I am uncomfortable. I am totally uncomfortable with a person humbling themselves like that in front of me. I am uncomfortable. You know what I mean? I am uncomfortable with another human being humbling themselves like that in front of me. You want to help the person up off their knees like, nah, it's okay. Don't worry about it, man. Yeah, because you just don't like that. You're uncomfortable. There's some people who stand there like, yeah, bow down to me. Yeah, apologize. Yeah. Some people are okay with that. Some people are okay with that. I am very uncomfortable with a person humbling themselves like that in front of me. I don't like that. I'm uncomfortable. You do that to God. You don't do that to another human being. And, some people are not thinking in terms of the humility that I'm displaying in front of you should be reserved for God. They're just trying to apologize to you. They're just trying to let you know that they messed up. They did something wrong. You know what I mean? But in their attempt to apologize to you, the humility makes the other person uncomfortable. It's eerie. It's very uncomfortable. And so Yusuf is basically saying, like, la ubarri'u nafsi, I don't acquit myself either. Like, we all shared in that, this is after he did nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. He says, indeed, the soul naturally inclines towards evil except those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy. So Yusuf is trying to lessen the embarrassment by saying, we all have weaknesses. It's just like she's saying, I desired you. I locked you in the room. And, I did all of these horrible things to you, Yusuf. And Yusuf is saying, we all have weaknesses. We all have weaknesses. Trying to let her know that she's not an anomaly. That any person could have been caught in that situation. Any person could have been caught in that situation that you were caught in. You know what I mean? Any person could have been caught in that situation, man. SubhanAllah. And so she admitted being wrong. And it was no need to further her embarrassment. It was as if that, Yusuf alayhi salam was kind of trying to bring an end to this particular chapter of his life. All right, so we move on to the next ayat, right? So the king, he says now, after everything is clear, after everything is cleared up, the king says, "Qala al-malik utuni bi." The king says, now bring Yusuf to me. Now bring Yusuf to me. Astakhlishu li nafsi. So I can appoint him a specific, exclusively, an exclusive position next to me. Because now after he's heard all of this, after the king has heard all of this, he has now, subhanAllah, he has now have a profound respect for Yusuf. He says, bring Yusuf to me. This is the second time he's telling them to bring Yusuf to him. This time he said, astakhlishu li nafsi. I will appoint him exclusively a position that is close to me. فَلَمَّا كَلَّمَهُ, and when the king spoke to Yusuf, قَالَ إِنَّكَ الْيَوْمَ لَدَيْنَا مَكِينٌ أَمِينٌ. Today, you are established in a position that is trusted, that no one can remove you from. I am appointing you to this position, and you are makinun amin. You are trusted, and you have been given this position specifically from me. So when the king heard about the innocence of Yusuf, he said to his court, bring Yusuf to me, and I will appoint him exclusively for myself. And when he spoke to Yusuf, he was even more impressed with Yusuf, and he was even more humbled by his situation, and he granted him a special position. It was as if the king saw Yusuf as somebody special, somebody valuable. Sounds familiar? The king appointed him. He said, "Astakhlishu li nafsi." I will appoint him exclusively, a position that nobody will take from him. You understand? Sound familiar? It was as if the king saw Yusuf as something precious, juxtaposed in contrast to the way that his brother saw him previously. And so in ayat number 20, go back to ayat 20, right? What did Allah say? وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ وَكَانُوا بِهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ. That the brothers sold Yusuf بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ for a cheap price, دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ, for just a few coins. 20 dirhams they sold their brother for. 20 dirhams they sold him for. You understand? 20 dirhams they sold their brother for. وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ, and they considered him insignificant. Fast forward. Fast forward. And the king appoints Yusuf to a position. And he says, أَنْتَ لَدَيْنَا الْيَوْمَ لَدَيْنَا مَكِينٌ أَمِينٌ. Today you are, in my sight, in my eyes, makinun. You have a high position, amin, and you are secure. You understand? It was as if the king saw Yusuf as something precious. Precious. And it brings me to lesson 52. Lesson 52. Just because people don't see value in you does not mean that you are not valuable. Just because people don't see value in you doesn't mean that you are not valuable. You understand? This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Zing, this is Allah elevating him. Now we get to the fourth part, which is ruf'at daraja, his elevated status in the earth. We didn't get to his elevated status in the hereafter. His elevated status. Now we've got to the fourth part. I told you throughout this whole ordeal, we were going to see four things. We were going to see the fadlu Yusuf. We were going to see the virtue of Yusuf. We were going to see the ilm Yusuf. We were going to see the knowledge of Yusuf. We were going to see the bara'ah. We were going to see the innocence of Yusuf. And we were going to see rif'atu daraja. We were going to see the elevated status of Yusuf in this life and in the hereafter. Now we come to part 4, the elevated status of Yusuf. Look at that, man. The king says after he spoke to Yusuf, فَلَمَّا كَلَّمَهُ, after the king spoke to Yusuf, he now elevated his status. I am appointing you specifically to this position that nobody can take you from. It was as if the king saw value in Yusuf when in fact his own brother sold him for 20 dirhams, saw no value in him. You understand? Just because someone doesn't see value in you does not mean that you are not valuable. Zahir ibn Haram, the Prophet ﷺ said jokingly, "Man yashtari hadal abd," who will buy this servant? Zahir said, "La tajiduni ya Rasulullah kasidan, la yashtarini ahad." He said, "O Messenger of Allah, you will find me worthless. Worthless. Nobody would purchase me. I'm worthless. Look at how the world looks at me. I'm a black slave, a descendant of Africa. Nobody sees any value in me. I'm worthless. لَتَجِدُنِي يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ كَاسِدًا. You will find me to be worthless." The Prophet ﷺ said, بَلْ أَنْتَ إِنْدَ اللَّهِ غَالٍ. He said, no, to God you are priceless. Just because people don't see your value doesn't mean that you are not valuable. Just because someone doesn't see your value doesn't mean that you are not valuable. He said, Bal anta indallahi ghalin. He said, no, to Allah, you are priceless. You are priceless. Don't ever let anybody devalue you. And most importantly, don't devalue yourself because you feel that other people don't value you. Don't devalue yourself because you believe that nobody sees value in you. There's value in you. As the saying goes, one person's trash is another person's treasure. One thing can have contradicting qualities to different people. Subhanallah al-Azim, man. Somebody doesn't see your value, that doesn't mean that there's no value in you. One person's trash, somebody might throw something away. A man might divorce you as a woman. A woman might ask you for a khula and walk away from you as a man, leaving you high and dry, feeling that you are worthless as a man. There's nothing valuable about you as a man. Your wife took your kids from you, went to court, filed child support against you, tarnished your honor, tarnished your name in the community, making everybody believe that you are the most horrible man walking on the face of the earth. That's her perspective, not your reality. That's her perspective, not your reality. Just because someone doesn't see value in you, a man married you, he divorced you. He divorced you, he discarded you, he threw you away as if you were nothing, divorced you and your children, left you high and dry, left you feeling like you were worthless, had you questioning your own femininity, had you questioning your own motherhood, had you questioning everything about yourself. Meanwhile, the whole time, just because he couldn't see your value doesn't mean that you are not valuable. Just because he didn't see your value doesn't mean that you are not valuable. Some man somewhere along the line will come along and find value in you. Some man will come along and see you as the precious jewel that you are. But don't sell yourself short because you believe, no value in me. Men don't see any value in me, so I'm just going to sell myself short. La wallahi, man. Maintain your dignity. Maintain your honor. Fix your crown and realize who you belong to. You belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah wouldn't have brought you in this world if there was no value in you. Out of millions and millions of sperm cells, you made it to the bag. The bag was the egg. You made it. You fertilized the egg. You made it to the bag out of millions of sperm cells. Don't tell me there's no value in you. Don't tell me that there's no value in you. You understand? Very important for you to understand that. So Yusuf alayhi salam went from being one person's trash, literally, they threw him in a well, threw him away, discarded him, and then sold him for a few coins. He literally went from being somebody's trash to somebody's treasure. You understand? The king is like, now bring him to me. Qala al-malik utuni bi. The king said, bring him to me. Astakhlishu li nafsi. I will appoint him a special place exclusively by me. You understand? Meanwhile, the brothers threw him in a well, discarded him. He literally went from being one person's trash to somebody else's treasure. Subhanallah al-Azim. Makinun amin. Makinun yani makana murtafi'a. He's given an elevated status. Amin, ma'mun, thiqa, meaning he is trusted. The king gave everything, put all of Egypt's finances in the hands of Yusuf. Go figure. This man just spent 12 years in prison, went from being a servant, a slave, to being now responsible for the whole entire treasury of Egypt. You understand? As the Christians say, won't he do it? Won't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do it? Allah qadirun ala kulli shay. Allah has power over all things, man. Can turn a servant into a king. And can turn kings into servants. Absolutely. And this was all a part of the victory that comes with patience. Didn't we talk about that yesterday? The Prophet ﷺ said, Inna nasr ma'a sabr. That victory comes with patience. You understand? Victory comes with patience. Some scholars say that what they talked about, this is the conversation that's important, because I'm digging deep. I'm like, فَلَمَّا كَلَّمَهُ, when the king spoke to Yusuf, what did they talk about? That's what I want to know. What was that conversation about? That is the conversation. That is the conversation that I'm looking at. What are they talking about? What are they talking about? Some of the scholars say that what they talked about was that the king wanted to hear the interpretation of his dream one more time from Yusuf. He wanted to hear it again, but he wanted to hear it from Yusuf himself. Say that, interpret that dream for me again, man. I need to hear that again from you. And some of the scholars say they talked about Yusuf's entire experience. The entire experience. From being thrown into the well, sold into slavery, brought up in the house of the Aziz, seduced by the wife of the Aziz, put in prison, being left in prison. And then finally, after the king heard that, mind blowing. As I said before, when you understand somebody's why, you have more respect for what? Their journey. When you understand someone's why, this is why the king had so much respect for Yusuf. After speaking to him and getting his narrative, understanding his why. How did you even end up in prison anyway? Where are you from? How did you end up in Egypt anyway? With a name like Yusuf, that wasn't common in Egypt. Where did that come from? Who's your father? This is the king now having a conversation. Yusuf finally gets to explain his why to someone who actually gives a damn. To someone who actually gives a damn. And keep in mind, this king, like other kings, he wasn't like a great king. He wasn't like a noble, honorable king. He was just a king from amongst the many kings that ruled Egypt. And he had his share of, oppression and, but this situation interests him. This situation for some reason interests him. And perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala muqallib al-qulub, perhaps Allah, the changer of the hearts, is the one who, intervened. As Allah says in the Quran, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَحُولُ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَقَلْبِ, and know that Allah comes in between a man and his heart. Nah, the king didn't revert to Islam. No, not at all. He's just another king from Egypt. But he took a personal interest in this story. I mean, keep in mind, from a king's perspective, Yusuf is an asset. He needed this guy. This guy got all this knowledge. I need him. Think about it from the king's perspective. When he first had the dream and he went out to his court and he talked to his scholars and his dream interpreters, and they couldn't interpret his dream. And then here's this guy in prison, gives him an interpretation of the dream that was mind-blowing, that would help save Egypt's economy. Obviously, I need this guy. You know what I mean? I need him. I need this guy next to me. So it wasn't that the king was like a good guy. I hope I'm not painting him as some noble character throughout this story. But the fact of the matter is that he, as a king, saw Yusuf as an asset. And what are some of the things, if you could think about the conversation that the king had with Yusuf, if you could think about that conversation, what do you think that conversation was like? What do you think the king, his final analysis of everything that he heard from Yusuf? I kind of like just pondering over the conversation, right? Number one, he understood Yusuf's sabr, his patience. He understood Yusuf's khuluq al-hasan, his good character. He understood Yusuf's muru'ah, his integrity. Sumu al-nafs, his self-respect. He understood Yusuf's sidq, his, truthfulness. He understood Yusuf's amana, his trustworthiness. That he said he would never betray this guy behind his back. He was trustworthy. He understood Yusuf's ilm, his knowledge. He understood Yusuf's bara'ah, his innocence. And he understood Yusuf's istiqamah, his steadfastness, his tenacity. And I mean, the list can go on and on and on. So as the king is sitting there listening to Yusuf give his story, the king is just picking apart all of these qualities that he's noticing from this man. Similar to the way that the girl in the story of Musa, if you remember the story of Musa when he fled Egypt and he went to Midian and he saw the two girls standing off to the side and he went and he helped them with their, give their animals something to drink. And then the girl went back home and told her father what she saw from Musa, right? And what did she say? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in surah number 28, 26. Turn to surah 28, ayah 26. Surah 28, ayah 26. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala captured a conversation between the girl and her father after what Musa did for her. She went to her father and she said, قالت إحداهن يا أبت استأجره إن خير من استأجرت القوي الأمين. She said, oh daddy, oh my father, hire him, bring this guy, right? Here again, the same way the king saw Yusuf is the same way this girl saw Musa. Musa gets to Midian, and he's sitting, relaxing by a tree. He noticed all of the men at the well giving their animals water to drink. And he notices two women standing off to the side. So he goes over to the women and he says, why are you guys standing over here? Why are you not over there giving your water? And they said, because the men, they take up all the space. And so Musa, his character, as the Prophet ﷺ likened Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anhu to Musa. So if you ever wanted to know what Musa's character was like, you need to look no further than Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. Just male bravado, just strong. Umar radiallahu anhu used to make tawaf, right? Just to give you an idea. Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anhu used to make tawaf, and he's just like pushing people out of the way to get to the black stone. And the Prophet ﷺ said to Umar, being like, you pushing people at the black stone, Umar, like, relax. Like, we were strong in Jahiliyyah, but in Islam, we're merciful. You know what I mean? You were strong in Jahiliyyah. Prior to Islam, people were terrified of you. You don't need the same demeanor in Islam, Umar. Calm down, So Musa grabs the reins of the animals from the girls, walks over, brodies his way into where the men were, gave the animals something to drink, then gave the animals back to the girls. Here you go. You understand? The girl saw that. She's obviously attracted to that. Strength. Strength is a magnet. It attracts people. Sometimes the wrong people and sometimes the right people. Nonetheless, you understand? Strength. People recognize. People want to be attached to anything that appears strong. People want to be attached. And this is, as I said before, with imams and students of knowledge, this is why the women desire you. Brothers, the women don't desire you because of you. They want you because you exude strength. You speak in Arabic, you seem like you got your deen, down pat, and people just naturally attracted to strength. In most instances, it has nothing to do with how you look. It has everything to do with the strength that you exude from your place, from your position. You understand? So the girl goes home to her father and says, Ya abati, oh father, istajirhu. Hire him. Hire this guy. We need him. In the khayra min istajarta al-qawi al-amin. She said the best person that you can hire is al-qawi al-amin. Qawi, amin. Pay attention to what she said. Al-qawi, strong. Amin, trustworthy. That's internal and external. You understand? Internal, he's trustworthy. She knew that he was trustworthy. Why? Because when he took the animals and he went and gave them something to drink, he could have just robbed them. You know what I mean? He could have just robbed them for the animals. The fact that he returned the animals back, it showed that he was trustworthy. And Kawi, obviously he was strong. He brodied his way through the crowd and got the animals the water that they needed. So she made this observation. You understand? She made this observation just from, and this shows you how people pondered and reflected on character. Character meant so much back then. Character meant so much back then. It means very little today, in today's time. As a matter of fact, to see a person with good character at this point, is like a victim. We're going to take advantage of you. We're going to exploit you. We're going to take advantage of you. Whereas during that time, to see a person with good character meant that she's telling her father, hire him, because of what she saw in that small little interaction. And through that little interaction, some of the scholars say it was Shu'aib, the prophet, and some of them said it was just an older man by the name of Shu'aib. doesn't really change the narrative any, you know, doesn't really change the narrative any. Nonetheless, the point that I'm making is that she observed these qualities. And the quality that she highlighted was both internal and external. All right. The same thing that the king observed with Yusuf. He saw that he was trustworthy. He saw that this man was patient. He was tenacious. You understand? He saw these things, external, internal. So he wanted to bring him on board. He wanted to bring Yusuf on board the same way the girl told her father, hire Musa. Hire Musa. He is Qawiyul Amin. He is trustworthy and strong. And so once the king spoke to Yusuf and he gave Yusuf this high status, Yusuf did something amazing. We're moving on to the next ayat number 55. So the king appoints Yusuf to this high status in Egypt, right? Yusuf humbles himself. Yusuf says, "Qala ij'alni ala khaza'in al-ard inni hafidhun alim." So when the king says, "Anta ladayna al-yawm makinun amin," that we're giving you a high position, a high status that is exclusively appointed to you by me, Yusuf says, no, I don't want that high status. He said, "Ij'alni ala khaza'in al-ard." He said, place me over the storehouses in Egypt, meaning place me over Egypt's finances. Inni hafidhun alim, because I am, I can protect your wealth and your economy. Wa alim, and that is something that I know about. Finances is something that I know about. All right. He didn't, if you notice, Yusuf alayhi salam, with that position being granted to him, he didn't ask the king for anything personally. You know what I mean? Usually, the king brings you close to him. You can ask for whatever you want. Yusuf didn't ask for anything personal from the king's dominion. I don't want anything from your dominion. Rather, he only requested that the king place him in a position that he was confident that he could handle. The king says, "Here, we want to give you this high status, this high position." Yusuf's like, "No, I don't want that high position. Just place me over the wealth of Egypt." Right? This brings me to lesson number 53. Lesson number 53. Something Warren Buffett said when he was asked, how did you become the Warren Buffett that we know today? How did you manage to get to this high position of one of the wealthiest men in the world? And Warren Buffett said, I stay within my circle of competency. Stay in your lane. Know your lane and stay in it. Stay within your circle of competency. Stay within your circle of competency. Do not allow others to dictate for you where your place should be if you know that it is beyond your capacity, beyond your threshold. Some people tell you, and this is a lot of people go wrong with marriage, right? A sister, she's trying to do another sister a solid. She says, "Oh, I think, my husband knows somebody, and it's this brother, and, he's married and he has a wife, but, I think you would do good in polygyny." You got to know yourself. You got to say to yourself, nah, he might be a good dude, but that situation ain't for me. Stay within your circle of competency. Stop letting other people dictate for you where your position should be. The king gave Yusuf this high position. Yusuf said, "No, I don't want that high position. Just place me over the economy. Place me over the wealth of Egypt. I know my place." Find your niche and gain mastery over it. Absolutely. Stay within your circle of competency. You understand? Yusuf did not allow the king to dictate to him where his position should be, even though he was the king. Because sometimes we say, "Oh, this person is knowledgeable. This person knows more than me." That doesn't mean yes, you might know more than you, but you don't know more than me about me. You understand? You know more than me. Got it. General knowledge. But when it comes to me, I am the scholar. You understand? When it comes to me, I am the scholar. You are not a scholar over me. You might be a scholar in that you have general knowledge, ilmul am, you have general knowledge, and I respect that. But when it comes to me, I'm the scholar. You understand? I am the scholar when it comes to me. Nobody can tell me what's best for me. I know what is best for me. You understand? I know me. I am the scholar of me. You understand? And that sounds like something that should be on a t-shirt, man. No, absolutely. No, you can give me the high status, but I don't want that. I need to be here. This is what I feel most comfortable with. This is the position that I feel most competent in. You understand? And the same thing goes for imams and students of knowledge. You got to understand your competencies and your inadequacies. You got to know where you are competent, the areas that of your position as an imam or student of knowledge, where you are competent, and you got to know where you are inadequate. Some students of knowledge and imams, you jumping out there to do marriage counseling. You ain't never did any reading about marriage counseling whatsoever. You haven't read one book about marriage counseling. And let me say something to you, brothers and sisters. Stop believing that every student of knowledge, every imam, every scholar is a marriage counselor. That takes, yes, know thyself. And to thine own self, be true. Absolutely. To thine own self be true. Absolutely. Stop thinking that every student of knowledge, every imam, every scholar has the wherewithal, has the competency to assist you in your marriage. That requires a certain temperament. It requires a certain understanding of people and behaviors. That requires a deeper level of human behavior and understanding of human interaction and engagement that most imams and students of knowledge have absolutely no clue. I'm telling you from firsthand experience. You can't imagine how many marriages have been destroyed because you guys have all automatically assumed because he's a graduate from the Islamic University. I don't care what his credentials tell you. Credentials are just a piece of paper that the university tells you that they qualify for. That doesn't mean, as I said before, I am the scholar of me. I know what my situation requires. I know what my situation needs. I don't care what the university said you qualified to do. You understand? I don't care what the scholars tell you you are qualified to do. I'm telling you my situation requires this type of nurturing and this type of tender loving care, and you don't qualify for that. You can't imagine how many marriages have been destroyed because you have gone to this student of knowledge, this imam, and he's giving you some bogus advice, bogus, not even taking the time to even understand your situation. Subhanallah al-Azim, man. Many marriages destroyed. Many marriages that could have been resolved. Many conflicts that could have been resolved with the most simplistic advice from a skilled marriage counselor. From a skilled marriage counselor, your problem that was minuscule could have been solved so easily. Had you just gone to the right people. And unfortunately, some students of knowledge and imams just don't know their place. They don't know how to say, hey, that is above me. That is above me. You know what I mean? Like, let me refer you. As an imam and as a student of knowledge, it is not your job to know everything, but it is your job to know everybody that knows everything. I can point you. I can delegate. I can put you in touch with people who can help you. And actually, the Sahaba used to do this. The Sahaba used to do what is called daf'ul fatwa. That whenever the Sahaba was sitting in a gathering and someone would walk up and ask them a question, they would pass it on to the next one. Go ask so-and-so. Go ask so-and-so. Go ask so-and-so. Even if they know the answer. Sometimes I know the answer and I might say, ask somebody a little bit more knowledgeable than me. I don't know. I know the answer, but I'm telling you I don't know because I want you to go to somebody who has more expertise. That is their field. If you ask me about finances, sister sent me a message yesterday about, inheritance. I told the sister, that's not my field of expertise. We had a whole semester on, al-mirath and al-irth and inheritance, which I had to take a second time because I failed the first time. That's not my expertise. That's not my expertise. I'm not an expert in, Islamic finances, Islamic, laws of inheritance. That's not my bag. That's not my bag. And I'm not going to front like it is. If you ask me about that, I'm going to tell you that's not my thing. You need to go talk to so-and-so. That's his thing. Know your lane. Know your place. Instagram, you're going to turn off. I'm going to turn you back on, inshallah. You guys, like, it's very important, man, that, and I mean, yes, to some degree, certain students of knowledge are, responsible. But you guys are also responsible for seeking out the right people. That's part of seeking knowledge, is seeking out the right people to address your specific issue. That's your responsibility to seek out the right people. You can't, you're not going to go to an eye doctor for, heart surgery. You understand what I'm saying? You're not going to go to an eye doctor for heart surgery. You're going to go to an eye doctor, you're going to go to a cardiologist or somebody who deals with hearts to deal with your heart issue. I mean, just the same. All right. So lesson number 53 is stay within your circle of competency, and make something understand. People will tell you, oh, you should do this, or you should do that, or you should be like this, or you should be like that. It is your responsibility to know your threshold. It's your responsibility to, take control of your narrative and say, no, I know me. I am the scholar of me. You understand? You might know everything else and you got all this grandiose knowledge of Islam. I got you. But I know me. I am the scholar of me. And there's nobody that can tell you about me better than me. There's nobody who knows what I need more than me. Period. All right. So Yusuf, he didn't say this seeking a position, but ensuring that the position wasn't given to someone who didn't know that what they were doing. So he said, "Ij'alni ala khaza'in al-ard." Place me over the storehouses of Egypt. Place me over, the wealth of Egypt. Imam al-Qurtubi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said this ayat points to the permissibility of a person requesting an action if he knows that he is qualified for it. So sometimes, you're filling out an application. They ask you, why do you qualify for this job? And sometimes, you might be a little uncomfortable, talking about yourself. If you know that you are qualified for that job, then there's nothing wrong with you stating your qualifications, as did Yusuf. Yusuf simply stated his qualifications. All right. And where did Yusuf learn this? Where did he learn about finances? Where did he learn about, where did Yusuf learn about all of this stuff? He learned about it from the Aziz. Where did Yusuf learn all of this about finances? He was raised in the house of the Aziz, the previous treasurer. You understand? So we also learn from this is that you should not restrict yourself to one specification in your career. He knew how to interpret dreams. He was good with money management. And he went on to later on be a prophet. Even when he became a prophet, do you think that he forgot about all of that stuff? No, he took all of that with him. It's all part of his journey, all a part of who he is. Do you think that I, as a imam or student of knowledge or leader in the Islamic community, you think all I know is Islam? That's all I have qualifications to teach? No. I remember, reading a biography of Sheikh al-Albani, rahimahullah ta'ala. And Sheikh al-Albani, if you didn't know anything about him, Sheikh al-Albani used to drive cabs, right? He used to drive cabs. In the morning, he would drive cabs. And he would only work from after Fajr to Dhuhr. And then after Dhuhr, he would, he also owned a watch shop. Sheikh al-Albani, rahimahullah ta'ala, he also used to fix watches. You understand? Right? And so one day, one of his students went with him to the car parts store. And when the sheikh got to the counter, he started ordering all of these different parts. And the student is looking at the sheikh like, and Sheikh al-Albani notices him looking at him and says, he said, "You are amazed that I know car parts?" He said, "What do you think? The only thing I know is the knowledge of hadith." What do you think? The only thing I know, but if most of us, if I mention the name Sheikh Al-Albani to you, most of us would only know, oh, he's a scholar of hadith in contemporary times. But you wouldn't know anything else about him. Don't restrict yourself to one specification. Sheikh Al-Albani looked at him and said, what you think, that the only thing I mastered was the knowledge of hadith? You don't think I know anything else? I know car parts. He fixes watches. He drives cabs. Like, he does it all. Some students of knowledge graduate from the university and think that, their sole source of income is only going to be teaching in the masjid. You got another thing coming, man. Wake up and smell the coffee. Like, it doesn't work like that. And this, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who also was a shepherd, he was a sheep herder as a child, as a kid, right? Which he learned from his uncle Abu Talib. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was also a merchant. He was also a businessman. He worked for Khadija for many years before he married her, and then took over her business. And she handed the business over. You understand what I'm saying? And then that skill the Prophet took with him on into as he was a prophet. How do you think the Prophet earned money? He had at one time 9 wives, 9 families. We say 9 wives, 9 families, because some of those women he was married to had children, multiple children that were not his. You understand? From previous marriages. You understand? So when we look at Prophet Muhammad, we say, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, oh, he had 9 wives. No, he had 9 families. Let's get it right. Because when you say he has 9 wives, that has negative connotations. It makes it look like he's just a sex monger, like just a guy who wants to be married to all of these women. But when we say 9 families, we humanize him. You understand? He had 9 families. Men should stop saying, oh, I got 2 wives, I got 3 wives. You got 2 families that you are responsible for. Let's use language that is responsible, language that connotes and denotes responsibility, because that's what polygyny is about. It's about being responsible. But when you say, oh, how many wives you got, Sheikh? Oh, I got 3 wives. Like, don't ever walk up to me, first of all, and ask me how many wives I got. Let me just give you a heads up if you don't want to be embarrassed, because you never walk up on a man and ask him how many wives he has. That's disrespectful, in my eyes anyway. And if you do it to me, I'm going to embarrass you. Don't ever do that to me. Change your language. Don't walk up to a man and say how many wives you got. Ask the man, if you so want to inquire, can I ask you a question without offending you? Or can I ask you a question, I hope it doesn't offend you? How many families do you have? How many families are you responsible for? You understand? You see how different that sounds? You see how different that sounds? But I've had brothers, Sheikh, how many wives, like, just being comfortable. Like, don't ever get comfortable with me like that. I don't know none of you like that. Don't get comfortable with me. Don't get comfortable enough to ask me anything about my family, especially not in a public setting, and especially not, in a disrespectful manner, if you don't want a disrespectful answer. You understand? Be respectful. Pull the person to the side. Hey, can I ask you a question? I don't want to offend you. It's regarding, your marital situation, your polygynous situation. And then the person will stop you ahead of time and say, listen, I don't entertain questions regarding my personal life, my family, whatever. You're like, all right, cool. Not a problem. You understand? You knock on the door first. You don't just walk in the door. And then when you ask, you don't ask how many wives you got. Because any man who is in polygyny, who is maintaining multiple families, that is a responsibility. And no man in polygyny looks at it as, oh, I got multiple wives. I'm just, walking around with all these women. You know what I mean? Nah, they look at it. These men spend money on mortgage and rent and taking care of families. You know what I'm saying? Like, this ain't no, I got multiple wives. Man, I got multiple families. You know how much I pay in mortgage and rent? You understand what I'm saying? Like, you know how much we come out of our pockets on a monthly basis? You pay rent, $600, $700, maybe $1,000. Talk to any man who has multiple wives, who is shouldering the financial responsibility of those families, man. That's you know what I mean? That's a lot coming out of their pockets. And for you to just walk up and say how many wives you got. Now, I don't have wives. I have families that I'm responsible for. Change the language. And perhaps if we change the language, we'll begin to change the culture surrounding polygyny, surrounding men having multiple wives, and we stop looking at them as just, sex mongering men who just want to dominate women. It's not as deeper than that. It's deeper than that. So the Prophet ﷺ had multiple families that he was responsible for. Where do you think all that money came from? Sometimes narrations mention the Prophet ﷺ would give some of his wives money that would be able to cover their expenses for an entire year. You understand? Cover his expenses for an entire year. And that wasn't off of begging the community for money. The Prophet ﷺ had multiple hustles. As they say, the average millionaire has how many streams of income? The average millionaire has at least 7 streams of income. 7 streams of income. And with the creation of social media, that's very easy to do in today's time. Very easy. All right, so now we're going to get to a very, very important part of this discussion, this story. Imam al-Qurtubi, he mentioned, as he's having this conversation with the king gives Yusuf control over the finances of Egypt. Fast forward a little bit, that the king عزل قطفير عما كان عليه وجعل يوسف مكانه. That the king gave Yusuf, look at how the turn of events. Look at how these events turn. Subhanallah. The king gave Yusuf, after Yusuf asked to be the treasurer over the wealth of Egypt, the king gave Yusuf the same position that the Aziz had. Subhanallah. The same position the Aziz had. The Aziz died when he was in prison. And now Yusuf is now in the position. I want you to watch how this whole situation goes 360 all the way around, back to the beginning, but with a new face. The king gave Yusuf the Aziz's position. So Yusuf is now the Aziz of Egypt. فزوج الملك يوسف راعيل الزليخة امرأة العزيز. And the king married Yusuf to Zuleikha. So not only did Yusuf get his position, he got his wife too. How about that? La ilaha illallah. You can't make this stuff up, man. La ilaha illallah, man. Subhanallah. As Allah says in the ayah, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. These are the days that we rotate between the people. One day you on top. The next day somebody else is on top. The king appointed Yusuf the position of the Aziz, who was dead, no longer here, and he married Yusuf to Zuleikha. When Yusuf was married to Zuleikha, he said to Zuleikha, أَلَيْسَ هَذَا خَيْرٌ مِمَّا كُنْتِ تُرِيدِينَ. Yusuf said to Zuleikha, isn't us being married as husband and wife better than the situation that you desired years ago? Isn't this better for us that we're married? SubhanAllah. فَقَالَتْ Zuleikha. Zuleikha said to him, they're having a conversation after they're married. This is Imam al-Qurtubi mentioned it. Not just Imam al-Qurtubi. Many of the scholars of tafsir mentioned the same narration because I wanted to get to the bottom of this. After Yusuf marries Zuleikha, he says to her, أَلَيْسَ هَذَا خَيْرٌ مِمَّا كُنْتِ تُرِيدِينَ. Isn't this better than the situation that you desired from the first time? Meaning you wanted to seduce me and wanted me to have sex with you, and we weren't married. But now that we're married, isn't this better for us? Listen to what Zuleikha says. What did I tell you guys before? I said the villain is a victim whose story was never told. When you understand somebody's why, it makes you have more respect, more sympathy for their journey. SubhanAllah. Zuleikha says, Ayyuha Siddiq. She said, oh, you truthful Yusuf. La tulumani. Don't find fault with me for what I did. She said, فَإِنِّي كُنْتُ إِمْرَأَةَ حُسْنَى نَاعِمَةً كَمَا تَرَى. She said, I was a beautiful woman. I was a beautiful woman, Yusuf. Don't blame me. Don't find fault with me for what I did, Yusuf. I was a beautiful woman. وَكَانَ صَاحِبِي يعني زَوْجِي لَا يَأْتِيَ النِّسَاء. She said, and my husband was not the type of man who went to women. He was aneen. كَانَ عَنِينًا. يعني he was a eunuch. Castrated. Castrated. This man was castrated. She said, I was a young, beautiful woman. And the man that I was married to, he was a eunuch. He was castrated. He didn't even have sex with women. She said, وَكُنْتُ كَمَا جَعَلَكَ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْحُسْنَى فَغَلَبَتْنِي نَفْسِي. She said, and you were beautiful as you know God made you. God made you beautiful. You were irresistible. You were irresistible. And my nafs, my desires got the best of me, Yusuf. My desires got the best of me. And when Yusuf went to consummate the marriage with Zulaykha, وَجَدَهَا عُذْرًا فَأَصَابَهَا فَوَلَدَتْ لَهُ رَجُلَانِ إِفْرَاثِيم وَمَنْشَأ. When Yusuf went to go consummate the marriage with Zulaykha, he found that she was a virgin. She had never even been touched by a man. Her husband never had sex with her. Subhanallah al-Azim. Subhanallah. قال وهب ibn Munabbih. She was a virgin. She had never even been touched by him, man. So you think about the situation, and would you have excused her? Because when we was back a few ayats, we were all looking at her like, how could she do that? She's scandalous. Why would she do that to him? Now that you understand her why, do you have a little bit more sympathy for her now? Absolutely. She said, I was a beautiful young woman, but I was married to a man at a young woman. I was married to this man as a young woman. This man never touched me. Never touched me. He was castrated. And that was something that, Middle Eastern cultures as well as China and, some of the empires, they used to do this. They used to castrate the men in order to enable them to exercise important influence over their positions. And it was a sign of trust and power. And usually the men who were castrated were usually raised up to high positions within the king's court. Usually men who were castrated were either castrated because they were children of orphans or they were children of, fornication and adultery. Or in certain cases, they were sold by their parents. Parents were poor, so they would sell their children. So they would castrate them, so as to not allow them to reproduce. And in some instances, they were castrated because that was a condition of their position. Meaning if they wanted this particular position, they have to be castrated. And don't think about that in a negative way, because men are castrated every day, all day to get certain positions that they're in right now. Think about professors in universities that have these great degrees that never speak truth to power. Yeah, you got a PhD, but you ain't going to bust a grape in a fruit fight. You ain't going to kill nothing, ain't going to let nothing die with your PhD. Yeah, you got a PhD. Great. But you ain't going to do nothing with your PhD. You're going to sit back behind a computer and you're going to wage war on social media. But if you even do that. But you ain't going to do nothing with your PhD. Castrated. Meanwhile, the person who doesn't have the PhD, person who's just trying to learn, they're filled with energy, filled with vigor, filled with enthusiasm, and want to change the world. Those are the people you're going to get the energy from. The PhDs, they've arrived. They ain't going to do nothing with their PhD. What they going to do? Show me one person with a PhD who's done, something miraculous, something life-changing, world-changing. Unless you Huey Newton, like Huey Newton, these guys have PhDs, but we're talking about people who was walking around with guns trying to defend their communities against white police. You understand? Those are the PhDs that made changes. We ain't living in those times. Ain't no Huey Newtons. That ain't gonna happen in today's time. Ain't no Asada Shakurs. Like those days are over with. Those are PhDs that change the world. You understand? Today's PhDs sit in universities, teaching in universities, spewing the narrative of the hegemony, if they even speak truth to power, being paid a paycheck to tell whatever narrative the university allows them to tell. You understand? Yeah, but Martin Luther King, come on, don't throw that out there. If you know Martin Luther King's history, he didn't really change much. There was a lot of opposition to Martin Luther King. Even the so-called bus boycott. I'm going to share an interview with you guys from Dr. Claude Anderson. I'm going to share an interview with you guys. Go back to the Breakfast Club interview that Dr. Claude Anderson did on the Breakfast Club. I'm going to share that interview with you. The Martin Luther King is not what everybody made him to seem. And I'm not taking away from his legacy. I'm not, sitting from this place of privilege talking about that. But Martin Luther King, there were deeper matters within him. There were deeper matters. Even he in one of his speeches said, I think I got it all wrong with this whole, integration and all of that other stuff. There were many people that opposed Martin Luther King, many black leaders that opposed Martin Luther King and this whole idea of integration. And perhaps if we had not fought so hard for integration and had learned to work within the resources within our own circle, maybe we wouldn't be in the damn situation that we in right now. The whole reason that we in the situation right now, financially, educationally, all around the board, is because of integration. You understand? So don't bring Martin Luther, man. You better know Martin Luther King's history before you come to me talking about Martin Luther King, man. I don't follow the script, the script that you're told in your local schools on black history of how great Martin Luther King was. And I'm not saying that he wasn't great, but there were some things that he did that was not so great. You understand? There were things that he did that was not so great. And if I were to lay that out for you right now, it would change your whole opinion about Martin Luther King. But the thing that we have to learn how to understand is that within greatness, there's mistakes. He can still be great, the Martin Luther King, the great. But within that doesn't restrict us from pointing out the flaws and the gross mistakes that the person has made. But integration was a huge mistake. And it was about money. Understand that. It was about money. And Martin Luther King bought into that nonsense. And he dragged the whole black community, most of the black community, into that. When people like, Malcolm X and others who were off to the side, like, man, y'all some clowns, man. Y'all clowns talking about integration. Malcolm X said, the only thing I want to do, the only reason I want to use the bathroom next to a white person is to flush him down with the rest of the that go down the toilet. You understand? That was the mentality. I'm telling you the mentality of Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King during that time. You understand? But he can still be great. I'm not taking that away from him. He can be great, but he can be great with mistakes. Perfectly flawed. You understand? He's perfect, but there's flaws. But integration was a huge mistake. And right now, we're trying to, now we're talking about buy black. We're talking about, let the black dollar circulate in the black community. Now we're realizing how bad, how horrible integration was. Now we're looking for charter schools rather than the public schools because we know that white teachers don't extend to black children the same mercy, compassion, and the same, There's preferential treatment in the public schools. And unfortunately for African American children in the public school, there's a direct pipeline from school to prison. And there's a direct pipeline from school to Princeton or from school to Harvard for our white counterparts. You understand? And we're realizing that now. So, I'm not taking anything away from him. But what I am saying is that he can be great, but great with mistakes. So, Wahab ibn Munabbih, he said, إنما كان تزويج زليخة بعد دخلتي إخوة يوسف. That Yusuf married Zuleika in that period of time when the brothers came to Egypt from Palestine the first time and then came back the second time. Within that period, that was the time that Yusuf married Zuleika. And Zuleika مات زوجها ويوسف في السجن. Her husband Aziz died while he was in prison. وذهب مالها وعمي بصرها Buka'in ala Yusuf. That the Aziz, Zuleika's husband, babe, open the door, please. Yeah. Just lock the door. The Aziz died The Aziz died while Yusuf was in prison. However, Zuleika's life changed dramatically. ذهب مالها. She lost all of her money, all of her wealth. فعمي بصرها. She went blind. You know why she went blind? You know why Zuleika went blind? She went blind crying over Yusuf. And this is the second person in this entire story that went blind crying over Yusuf. The first person was Zuleika. She went blind crying over Yusuf while he was in prison. And number two was his father, Yaqub. He went blind crying over the loss of Yusuf. SubhanAllah. People going blind over crying over Yusuf. But Zuleika ended up losing her eyesight because she felt horrible about what happened to Yusuf. But she was caught. She was caught in an impasse. Like, do I own up to it and, lose my status and let this servant go even though I really love him? Or do I just let him linger in prison for a little bit while I continue to enjoy my life? I gotta, it reminds me of The Great Gatsby. If you're familiar with that story, at the end of it, the girl, she loved Gatsby. She loved him, but she wasn't willing to relinquish, the lifestyle that her husband was providing for her, and she could not go all the way with him. So she was at an impasse. Do I go with Gatsby and I don't really know how long? There's no stability. He's having all of these great parties at night, but I don't really see any stability in that. You understand? Or do I stay with my husband, who I know this guy is, generationally wealthy. You understand? I know his wealth ain't going nowhere. And she opted to stay with her husband, and Gatsby's his story ended the way that it ended. It's the same thing. Sometimes women have wealth and status and they're not willing to relinquish that. And they're willing to let another person suffer for them. You know what I mean? They're willing to let another person suffer. So that was her deal. But she was hurting. She was hurting on the inside. And that brings me to lesson number 54. Lesson number 54. Pain is distributed equally in oppressive situations. Make no mistake about that. Pain is distributed equally in oppressive situations. Sometimes we get oppressed and we walk away and we're hurting, we're grieving, we're suffering because of what somebody did to us. And we think that the other person is living their best life. No, they're not. I promise you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like dhulm. Allah does not like oppression. Nobody gets away with that. Nobody gets away with oppression. You understand? Yes, she did send him to prison, but she got hurt on the end. Her husband died. She lost all of her wealth. She lost her eyesight. She lost everything. And not only that, فَصَارَتْ تَتَكَفَّفِ النَّاسِ فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَرْحَمُهَا وَمِنْهُمْ لَا يَرْحَمُهَا. She began begging people in the street. She went from Zuleika, the wife of the Aziz. She went from Zuleika, the wife of the Aziz, to this blind woman now walking around begging people for money. Some people having mercy on her and some people not having mercy on her. You understand? You understand? Lesson number 54. Pain is distributed equally in oppressive situations. Allah says in the Quran, turn to Surah number 4, ayat 104. Surah 4, ayat 104. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Sahaba, إِن تَكُونُوا تَأْلَمُونَ فَإِنَّهُمْ يَأْلَمُونَ كَمَا تَأْلَمُونَ وَتَرْجُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَرْجُونَ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا. Allah says to the Sahaba, in their pursuit of the enemy, fighting with Quraysh, that if you suffer a loss, then indeed know that they suffered a loss. Just like you suffered a loss. If you are in pain, then they are in pain, just like you are in pain. وَتَرْجُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَرْجُونَ. And you desire your reward from Allah, something that they will never get. You understand? We all lose. In an oppressive situation, there is no winner. There is no victor. Understand? As we can see from Zuleika's situation. And Zulaykha, she said in her conversation with Yusuf, she said, Subhana man ja'ala al-muluk abidin bi ma'asiyatihim wa ja'ala al-abid mulukin bi ta'atihi. She said, glory be to Allah who makes the kings servants because of their disobedience to him, and he makes servants kings because of their obedience to him. Allahu Akbar. She's looking at her position with Yusuf now. She's feeling like I'm a little inferior now because look at you now. You are the Aziz now. And she's feeling like Yusuf married her out of pity. She said, but glory be to Allah. Glory be to God who will turn kings into servants because of their disobedience and will turn servants into kings because of their obedience. Allahu Akbar. Powerful. And so Yusuf says to Zulaykha, he said, هل بقيت تجدين مما كان في نفسك من حب لي من حبك لي شيئا. He said, is there anything left in you, Zulaykha, that you desire from me that you desired before? Is there anything that you desire? Anything left that you desire from me? And Zulaykha turns to Yusuf and she says, قالت والله لنظرة واحدة إلى وجهك أحب إلي من الدنيا بحذافيرها. She said, oh Yusuf, looking at you one time, having the ability to see your face one time. She's blind. Yusuf said, is there anything else that you desire from me that I have not given you? She said, Wallahi, Yusuf, to look at your face one time would be more dear to me than the world and everything that it encompasses. Subhanallah al-Azim. I just want to look at you one time. One time. That's the only thing that I desire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took her wealth, took her husband, took her eyesight, took everything from her. Stripped her of everything. And she acknowledged it by saying, glory be to Allah who will turn kings into servants because of their disobedience and will turn servants into kings because of their obedience. Subhanallah al-Azim. So Yusuf, trying to oblige her, Yusuf says, stand with me and pray. فَقَامَ Yusuf فَيُصَلِّي. So Yusuf got up to pray and calling on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Pay attention to the dua. Zulaykha gathered herself and prayed behind Yusuf. This is the way that it should have been done from the door. If you notice, now she's behind him praying. In previous situations, she was behind him, chasing him to rip his shirt off. Look at how the story has changed. Look at how the story has changed. She was once behind him, chasing behind him to rip his shirt off. Now she's behind him praying. Brothers, don't lead the sisters into the haram. Don't lead her into your bedroom. Lead her in salat. Lead her in prayer. فسأل الله أن يعيد إليها شبابها وجمالها وبصرها حتى عادت أحسن مما كانت يوم راودته إكراما ليوسف لما عف عن محارم الله. So Yusuf calls out to Allah, oh Allah, return to Zulaykha, my wife, return to her shabab, her youthfulness, return to her jamal, her beauty, return to her eyesight. Calling on Allah to return to her these things that were taken away from her. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returned each and every one of them back to her better than she had it the first time on the day when she desired to seduce him. Ikraman li Yusuf, as a means of conferring his ni'mah, his blessing on Yusuf because of him staying away from what is haram. Don't tell me staying away from haram doesn't have virtue. Don't tell me staying away, avoiding what is haram will not have virtue. You can stay away from something that's haram and then turn around and use that as tawassul. Oh Allah, if I avoided this brother, if I stayed out of this man's DM, if I stayed away from this sister, desiring nothing but obedience to you, oh Allah, give me this. Oh Allah, bless me with that. He said, oh Allah, restore to Zulaykha her shabab, her youthfulness. Restore to her jamal, her beauty. Restore to her eyesight. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala restored over time each and every one of those things. Ikraman li Yusuf, as a blessing for Yusuf because of his staying away from what is haram. Even Imam al-Qurtubi mentioned in his tafsir, ألقى الله في قلب يوسف من محبتها أضعاف مما كان في قلبها. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put love in the heart. Pay attention to this. I'm going to end with this. Allah put in the heart of Yusuf love for Zulaykha more than what was given to Zulaykha for Yusuf. Meaning Yusuf loved Zulaykha more than Zulaykha loved Yusuf. Yusuf fell in love with Zulaykha, had more love for Zulaykha than Zulaykha had for Yusuf. So Yusuf turns to Zulaykha one day and he says to her, "Ma sha'nuki la tuhibbinani kama kunti fi awwal al-marra." Yusuf says to Zulaykha, "What is wrong with you that you don't love me like you used to? What is wrong with you that you don't love me like you used to? You used to be falling all over me. You used to be all over me. What is wrong with you that you don't love me like you used to?" And Zulaykha said, "Lamma dhuktu mahabbatullah shaghalani dhalika an kulli hubb." She said, when I fell in love with God, I became preoccupied with loving God than loving anybody else. Subhanallah. She said, when I found love, the love of God, I became preoccupied with loving him that I can't love anybody else on that level. You understand? This is something for women to understand. Something for men to understand, because sometimes, we introduce our wives to the deen and they fall in love with the deen more than they fall in love with us. And some of us can't handle it. You were with your wife at the beginning. Maybe she was a new shahada. You converted her to Islam. You gave her dawah and she was ignorant. She didn't really know much. And she loving all over you. And then you introduce her to the deen. You introduce her to Islam. She begin loving students. She begin loving, learning. She becomes a student of knowledge. And she's learning. And she's sitting in front of computers and learning. And sit in front of books. And you're like, damn, like you ain't even over me. You ain't even crawling all over me and drooling all over me like you used to. Because she found love in seeking knowledge. She found love in knowing more about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You understand? And some of us, we can't handle that. Subhanallah, man. I mean, I am at a loss for words. I was going to get this to you guys tomorrow. But my wife was like, nah. I gave her little tidbits today. And she was like, nah, you got to do that class today, man. It's the last 10 nights. We got to push forward, and all of the other, advices that came with that conversation. And here we are. But alhamdulillah, man, it's beautiful. It's beautiful to see. And that closes that chapter, because the very next ayat is the brothers of Yusuf came from Palestine to Egypt seeking food. So now we're about to open a whole other chapter. That closes that chapter of his life. That closes that chapter of his life. You can look in the books of tafsir, the tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi. Ibn Kathir doesn't mention that narration, but you got to think about Ibn Kathir. He came later. The earlier scholars of tafsir, they kind of mention that. Tabari, Qurtubi. You can check in those books of tafsir. Qurtubi has a whole long passage about that. Whether or not all of it is authentic or not, that remains to be seen. There's nothing mentioned in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obviously, Imam al-Qurtubi got it from somewhere. But at the same token, it's just, just trying to help us, trying to help us to piece together this entire story. Allah has only given us the gist of it. He's not giving us the tafasil. No, Imam Sa'di doesn't mention it. Imam Sa'di doesn't mention it. But here again, Imam Sa'di's, 80 years ago, Imam Sa'di was the Sheikh of Sheikh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala. Abdurrahman al-Nasr al-Sa'di. He was the Sheikh of Sheikh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. We're talking about maybe 80 years ago, 60 years ago. So the more contemporary scholars, they're not going to give you the tafasil. They don't give you all of the details. They only give you the gist of the tafsir because they're basing it off of, the previous scholars of tafsir. So you would have to dig, for that. But it's just a beautiful thing to see how that situation was rectified, And you guys can ponder, ponder over, all of the conversations and everything that took place with that situation. But, the statement of Zulaykha was so powerful. She said, "Glory be to Allah who turns kings into servants due to their disobedience, and turns servants into kings due to their obedience." That was so powerful, man. So powerful. But alhamdulillah, that closes that chapter of our story. And inshallah ta'ala, tomorrow we will open up another chapter. And that is Yusuf's opportunity now to confront his brothers as the Aziz, the second most powerful man in Egypt. So we look at how this whole story turns full circle, where Yusuf, discarded by his brothers, now they need him. They considered him insignificant. Now they are in need of him. And we'll see how that, inshallah, plays out. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. سبحانك ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Inshallah, I will begin uploading the previous videos to YouTube. Some of them are already on YouTube. I believe I stopped at 12. You can go to my YouTube page, www.rawdah, R-A-W-D-A-H, or Shadeed Muhammad. You can find my YouTube page, and all of the previous videos have been uploaded up to 12. Tonight we're at 16, so there's about 4 videos that I haven't uploaded that I will upload between today and tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. All right, jazakumullahu khairan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from you your fast, your dua, your standing, your dhikr, your sujood, and all of your ibadah during this time. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.